He's gonna explain it best we can. It's time to get Lernid with the...
Hey, what's up? Big Earl, Northtownsound. How's it going? Yeah, it's the ugly mug. Deal with it. I've been dealing with it for decades. I've come to the conclusion there's enough normal looking people on YouTube that maybe I should get over the shyness and whatever apprehensions I have and put a face to like the 10-year-old sounding voice, okay? And to prove that when I say I'm old man punk noise monkey, I'm telling the truth. You see them gray hairs? Earned every single one of them. Some in there. Kind of cut them off, but whatever. Anyways, I got into a really interesting conversation with a guy this week, learned something, and I went, I gotta comment on this and explain something to people. Guy took me to task on the video that I had made for the Moski Descent, December, DEC, whatever it is. This is a buffer booster pedal, and it's a really good buffer. He said I was demoing a buffer incorrectly. He said what buffers are used for is you put them at the end of your signal chain on a pedal board in order to increase treble and to get rid of tone suck. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, read about it. What you do by putting this in, this gets rid of any sort of signal degradation that happens because of all the plugs that are on your board, and it makes it sound like you're not playing through any effects at all. And I'm like, what? He was like, look it up. It's common knowledge. Use a buffer, might need an EQ pedal or something like that. That gets rid of any dullness, any lack of treble, anything that happens, and makes everything sound crystal clear and fantastic. And I'm like, what? And I look it up. And there's all these people talking about doing this online. And I'm like, what? That is a really goofy way of dealing with a simple issue. So we're going to talk about this. And we're going to talk about this with some perspective, with a little bit of history, and a little bit of practical sense. Shall we? A buffer is a circuit that changes the signal from high impedance to low impedance. Now, buffers are traditionally used in situations where cable length is excessive to the point where it reduces high-frequency transmission. They don't add treble unless someone adds a treble booster circuit to the buffer, which it sounds like some builders are doing. Now, where do we run into high-frequency loss in cables? It's somewhere around the 20-foot length. Now, there's all these folks online that are saying the typical picker, like you or me, runs a 6 to 10 foot cord from their guitar to their pedal board and a 20+ foot one to their amp. And therefore, a buffer is going to solve any sonic issues they have. Okay, so there's my dirty shoe. There's my tape measure. As you can see, I'm at about 20 feet. And way over here is my amp. So if I take that off of zoom, there you go. That's my messy living room. So that's 20 feet. Some of you folks are playing some big ass gigs, man. Holy. I have never played on a stage that deep in my life. I've played on stages that are narrower than that, you know what I mean? The last bar band gig that I saw was more typical where, you know, you take 2 steps back and your ass is up against your amp. So that's what they're saying people are running from pedal boards to their amp for cable length. Think about that. So let's say I'm going to make a pedal board out of these pedals. So I have 7 true bypass pedals, and I got my DS1 because I want that 90s heavy rock tone. Oh, wait a second though. I can't use the DS1, can I? This thing is not true bypass. This is a buffered bypass pedal. And if you go to all the forums and you go to all the manufacturers, they will tell you buffered bypasses are a no-no because they suck your tone, they get rid of transparency and rob you of treble. So I better get rid of this and change it to something else, right? Okay, so I changed out the distortion. That one's true bypass, even though I don't like it as much. That means everything's going to be cool here now, and I'm not going to have tone suck. But, you know, I plug all this in, and something happens to my tone, and I can't figure out why when I'm running through all these pedals it's changing my tone. So I guess the solution is I'm going to have to put a buffer at the end there because everybody knows that buffers eliminate tone suck and add transparency to the signal. Okay, well, I'll just do that instead. No, oh no, I can't because this is buffered. That's right, and buffer sucks tone. So that wouldn't work, but I need a buffer because buffers reduce tone suck. And what? So as an aside, I find it interesting. Boss is now using the fact that their output is buffered as a selling feature. Okay? If you go back on my channel, I did a video a couple of years back about true bypass and who really gives a flying fuck about it. And one of the things I said, give it a couple of years, everybody's going to be talking about buffered bypass. You see, goes around, comes around. Marketing always wins. To me, this all comes from a misunderstanding from the history of boards. Arguably, the father of the modern pedal board has got to be Pete Cornish, who started in the 70s building rigs for people like Fripp and Gilmore and May and Summers and Reed, etc., etc. And often his rigs had linear buffer boosters integrated into them, for very different reasons though, mind you. Like with May, Cornish had to take the signal from 3 relatively low output Burns pickups and run them through 3 echoplexes, which really messes with the sound. Or Bob Bradshaw putting together these rack mount systems that had to blend guitar, studio, and live sound rack gear, all designed for different operating environments and all for different input impedances. So I'm thinking that people are confusing what was done in the past to deal with mismatching equipment and trying to apply that to the modern world, where inherently the gear all works together better. Common misconception. When you're hooking up a pedal board, your enemy is not the cable. It's the connectors. You have to remember, every time that you're plugging in a pedal with a connector, you're using a physical mechanical connection to transfer audio signal. Okay? This is wire. Yeah, you get degradation on wire, but it's nowhere near as much as these connections. And again, in a rig like this, look at how many connections you have. You see this? This is technology that was originally invented in the 1870s. This is your menace. Is there an easy way around this? No. What you would have to do is hardwire all this stuff together, right? And you're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. That's what paid people like P. Cornish to do, okay? So you hook all this up and you find you don't like the non-affected tone when all this stuff's turned off, okay? It's suddenly sounding duller. It's not sounding as shimmery and transparent as you want it to, okay? So, you throw a buffer at the end, right? You might have to throw an EQ at the end, right? There's a better way of doing it. You do this. Problem solved. I have been in recording situations, everything from like pro studios to the cheesiest home setups. It doesn't matter how massive your effects rig is. I have never, ever in my life run into an audio situation that couldn't be dealt with by tweaking the amplifier. Again, these are here for a reason, okay? You don't set your EQ once and then epoxy the knobs in place. Learn to use them on your amp. Most real pedal monkeys do. It's kind of interesting. If you go into a recording studio, you go into a radio station, you go into a movie soundstage, television production facility, any place where they're recording pro audio, they will use the least amount of cable possible so they have the least amount of high-end loss. So if you're not playing with your amp way over there, you don't need all of this cable. Common sense tells you, use a shorter cable, okay? Maybe if you're playing a big-ass rock star stage like that, you might need a buffer, but I don't know. There's lots of other ways around it. You know, Hetfield doesn't use one. Yeah, okay, I know what a bunch of you are thinking right now. You're sitting there going, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. There's history, there's common knowledge, there's electronics, there's math. Okay, you know what? Fine. Fine. You know what? Cool. You win. I'm going to buy your argument. Okay? So, from one idiot to another, can I ask you a question? I'm going to set up a pedal board and I'm going to put a buffer at the end of it to get rid of tone suck, add clarity, and add treble to things. So, what's the last effect I should have before the buffer? Should I use my ring modulator? Should I use my hog? Should I use my Murph? You see, this is the problem. This is a concept that wannabe blues lawyers are coming up with. Guys who figure a large pedal board is like 2 delays and 3 overdrives that they can stack. And they want to figure out some way of bypassing it all so they can get my tone, which is probably like a Strat through a Hot Rod Deluxe or something anyways. Not knocking that, but you know what? That's not your tone. That's like 10 million other people's tones, okay? This is a goofy way of doing it. Going back to Cornish, the guy who gave us the idea of using buffers, he used it for a completely different reason. He wanted to raise impedance. The dude is anti-true bypass. Check out the link below. He would take a bunch of vintage pedals that somebody like Gilmore would provide him, hardwire them all together, bypassing all the plugs, and then run the impedance as high as possible so Gilmore wouldn't get any noise when he was playing on top of a 30-foot wall of styrofoam bricks. You're not that kind of rock star. Neither am I. Most of us are lucky if we can play without the amp against our asses. So maybe if you're playing through all this stuff and the sound of none of the effects on are driving you nuts, maybe you shouldn't be playing through all this stuff. Or if it bugs you that much, maybe set up a switching system so everything's on an individual loop. They're fairly inexpensive nowadays. Or work around it. Remember, these crazy knobs here. This reminds me of that kind of parable story thing about the American and the Russian space programs when they were trying to figure out how astronauts were going to write in space. And the Americans went through and they spent supposedly $24 million or whatever coming up with some new fancy high-tech pen with a cartridge that could write upside down and zero gravity and blah, 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 so they could send it off on Apollo or whatever. And the Russians sent their astronauts out with pencils. Frankly, there's always an easier way of doing things. Will putting a buffer at the end help your tone if you've got a lot of cables and pedals in there? Might. It's probably not going to help enough to waste the space on one. That's what it comes down to in the end. There are better ways of dealing with it. More importantly, you got to cope with it. Again, to quote Nels Cline, degradation is my tone. Sonic inspiration trumps fidelity. So, all that said and done, does that mean I'm going to stop selling buffers? Hell no. These are useful, okay? As I've said before, and I've sold tons of these to people for this. If you have one of these and you plug into it something with low output single coils, so let's say typical Mahui, or if you got like an old 60s Japanese guitar, this will level off your impedance, makes it sound better, gets rid of some of the strident highs, doesn't add treble, it smoothens them out, okay? And that's what buffers do. If you got an old vintage effects pedal, this can help sometimes if you've got something that really messes with the high frequencies, like, you got like an old vintage wah. Okay, one of these will help you really well. To put this at the end of a pedal board and supposedly have it be a magic panacea to improve the sound of all those plugs and stuff, nah, that's not what it's for. This is not going to magically create my tone. And again, you want to know what your tone really is? Plug it into your amp using one of these. Anything else is a compromise, and you're compromising your tone. You know what? Learn to live with compromise. Lots of people do. I'm Canadian. We're really good at dealing with compromise, right? So there, I learned you. Hopefully this video is a little more exciting than some of the old ones. Again, it's not just the jazz hands thing. I got some more stuff coming in, some brand new stuff actually coming from the good folks at Moski, some really exciting stuff that they're coming up with, and even more. So, you know what? Stay tuned. We'll see what happens, okay? Big Earl, Northtown Sound. Later.